Live from New Delhi, you're watching DD India Live, India's voice to the world. I'm Preeti Kaur. Coming up in the next 30 minutes. Prime Minister Narendra Modi arrives in Canada to participate in the Group of 7 Leaders Summit in Canada's Kananaskis, to also hold bilateral meetings with world leaders on the sidelines. G7 leaders affirm that Israel has a right to defend itself, also underline stand that Iran cannot have a nuclear weapon. Israel-Iran conflict escalates for the 5th day. Israeli military says it killed Iran's armed forces chief of staff. Trump marks early exit from G7 due to West Asia crisis. Rebuffs French President Macron for suggesting he offered ceasefire talks. Says Macron has no idea why he left early. India moves students out of Tehran and Iran crisis. Amid the Iran crisis, India issues alert, advises citizens in Iranian capital to relocate for safety or contact the embassy. MEA establishes 24/7 control room in New Delhi. Gujarat battered by heavy rains as the Met Department issues a red alert for Saurashtra and Kutch. Forecast of heavy to extremely heavy rainfall in many states across India. After successfully concluding the Cyprus leg of his 3-nation visit, Prime Minister Narendra Modi has arrived in Canada early this Tuesday morning to attend the G7 summit. We know leaders from Britain, Canada, France, Germany, Italy, Japan and the US, along with the European Union, have gathered in Kananaskis for the Group of 7 or the G7 summit. Prime Minister Modi is visiting Canada at the invitation of Canadian Prime Minister Mark Carney. This is Prime Minister Modi's first visit to Canada in a decade. He is on a 4-day, 3-nation visit of Cyprus, Canada and Croatia. Prime Minister Modi will also exchange views with leaders of the G7 countries and hold several bilateral meetings during the visit. DD India's correspondent Amritpal Singh reports from Canada's Alberta.
As the gathering of the leaders of arguably the most powerful 7 nations of the world, the Western powers, began here in the Rocky Mountains of Alberta, war continues to dominate the agenda of the G7. And it's not the Russia-Ukraine war alone, given the fact that President Zelensky has been invited to attend this time around. It is the latest Israel-Iran conflict that continues to dominate the agenda here in Canada. While Canadian Prime Minister Mark Carney wants to push his agenda for strengthening global peace and security, building critical mineral supply chains and creating jobs, issues such as the US tariffs and conflicts in West Asia and Ukraine continue to dominate the summit.
This issue, Iran-Israel conflict, will be very high on the agenda of the G7 summit.
And this is an issue on which there are deep divisions within the grouping on how the conflict should be brought to an end. All that the G7 leaders could agree upon is to issue a joint statement calling for de-escalation. Canada has already ditched the idea of a comprehensive joint communique and is expected to issue chair summaries instead. Apart from the G7 countries, leaders from India, Ukraine, Mexico, Australia, South Africa, South Korea and Brazil will be attending the outreach session on the 17th of June. Prime Minister Modi will be arriving on the evening of June 16th Canadian time, marking the second leg of his 3-nation tour after Cyprus. He will exchange views with the leaders of G7 countries, other invited outreach countries, and the heads of international organizations at the summit on crucial global issues, including energy security, technology and innovation, particularly the AI energy nexus and quantum-related issues.
This is the 6th consecutive time that India has been invited as a G7 guest country, which speaks for itself about India's importance in the world. There will be discussions on the sidelines within the G7, or also on the sidelines with all the invitee countries, with the G7 countries, especially on topics of energy security, innovation, emerging technologies, quantum, AI, things which affect all of us today.
The Prime Minister will also hold several bilateral meetings on the sidelines of the summit. Apart from India's participation in the outreach session of the G7, Prime Minister Modi's bilateral engagements with world leaders would be significant, especially the one with Mark Carney, which could well prove to be an opportunity to reset the ties between the two nations. With cameraman N.A. Sivakumar, this is Amritpal Singh for DD India in Alberta, Canada.
The group of 7 nations expressed support for Israel and labelled its rival Iran as a source of instability in the West Asia. In a statement issued late on Monday, the leaders called for peace and stability in the region. The joint statement backed by Trump, released by Canada, urged that the resolution of the Iranian crisis leads to a broader de-escalation of hostilities in the Middle East, including a ceasefire in Gaza. The statement also said that Israel has a right to defend itself and stressed the importance of the protection of civilians as the growing attacks kill civilians on both the sides. Britain, Canada, France, Germany, Italy, Japan and the United States also stated their conviction that Iran can never have a nuclear weapon. The air war between Iran and Israel, which began on Friday when Israel attacked Iran with airstrikes, has raised alarm in a region that has already been on the edge since the start of Israel's military assault on Gaza in October 2023. Earlier on Monday, Canadian Prime Minister Mark Carney welcomed world leaders as they began talks with escalating conflict in Ukraine and the Middle East hogging the agenda. In the opening remarks, Canadian Prime Minister Carney underlined the importance of cooperation to enhance resilience and economic progress.
Nostalgia isn't a strategy. We have to change with the times and to build a better world. And some of you, such as you, Mr. President, have anticipated these massive changes and are taking bold measures to address them. All of us around this table are reinforcing our militaries and security services for the new world. But we all know that there can be no security without economic prosperity and no prosperity without resilience. And in a world where shocks flow across the borders, that resilience comes from cooperation that starts around this table.
The Group of 7 summit began in Canada on Monday. The world leaders were scrambled to contain the escalating conflict between Israel and Iran over Tehran's nuclear program. US President Donald Trump said that Iran should talk about de-escalating before it is too late.
They'd like to talk, but they should have done that before. I had 60 days and they had 60 days, and on the 61st day I said, we don't have a deal. They have to make a deal, and it's painful for both parties, but I'd say Iran is not winning this war, and they should talk, and they should talk immediately before it's too late.
US President Donald Trump left the Group of 7 summit early as he hinted of greater involvement in the Israel-Iran conflict and warned Tehran residents to evacuate. At a group photo with fellow G7 leaders in the scenic mountain resort of Kananaskis, he underlined that he has to be back as soon as possible. But after hesitating at backing a joint statement on the crisis, Trump relented during a dinner at the forested lodge under the snow-capped mountains in Kananaskis. White House Press Secretary Caroline Leavitt said that Trump would attend the leaders' dinner before running to the White House. The US president will miss a day of meetings that was expected to include discussions with the leaders of Ukraine and Mexico. He has repeatedly declined to say if the United States would participate in Israel military action. The president, who has praised Israel's strikes, despite his stated preference for diplomacy, said Iran would be foolish not to agree to a negotiated settlement. U.S. forces in the Middle East remain in a defensive posture, a White House spokesman stressed. Iran, since Trump pulled out of an earlier nuclear deal in 2018, has ramped up uranium enrichment, but not yet at the level to create an atomic bomb. Israel is widely known to have nuclear weapons, but does not acknowledge them publicly. Trump rejected claims that his early exit from the G7 summit was related to efforts towards a ceasefire between Israel and Iran. Trump rebuffed French President Emmanuel Macron's claims that he left the G7 summit to work on a ceasefire between Israel and Iran. Trump dismissed the assertion as incorrect, saying Macron had no understanding of the real reason for his return, which he hinted was related to something far more significant. Earlier, Macron suggested that Trump had made an offer for a ceasefire between Israel and Iran, and nuclear talks with Iran could resume once a ceasefire is achieved.
Écoutez, il y a deux choses. La première, le président s'est exprimé il y a quelques minutes pour dire qu'il y avait des discussions qui étaient en cours, ce qui est une bonne chose. Et donc, si les États-Unis d'Amérique peuvent obtenir un cessez-le-feu, c'est une très bonne chose. Et la France le soutiendra et nous le souhaitons. Ensuite, je dis, il est absolument essentiel que toutes les frappes de part et d'autre qui se font contre des infrastructures énergétiques, administratives, culturelles et encore plus contre la population civile cessent. Rien ne les justifie, rien. Et elles sont, elles, absolument intolérables. Et ensuite, dès que le cessez-le-feu sera obtenu, et je pense que les annonces qui ont été faites par le président Trump sont tout à fait positives et le rôle que les États-Unis d'Amérique auront à jouer est clé, les Français, à leur côté, les Britanniques et les Allemands sont disponibles pour reprendre des discussions sérieuses. Discussions que nous n'avons jamais...
Canadian Prime Minister Mark Carney and Japanese Prime Minister Shigeru Ishiba reaffirmed their nation's strategic partnership during the G7 summit in Canada. The discussions focused on economic cooperation and geopolitical stability amid global uncertainties. Earlier, Ishiba met U.S. President Donald Trump, urging Washington to lift tariffs on Japanese cars and other imports. Tokyo is seeking the removal of a 25% tariff on vehicles and a 24% reciprocal tariff, currently paused until 9 July to safeguard its export-driven economy. Since assuming office on 3rd of June, South Korean President Lee Jae-myung has arrived in Canada for the G7 summit, marking his first diplomatic engagement. His office confirmed the ongoing coordination for bilateral discussions with attending leaders, with the possibility of trilateral talks involving Washington and Tokyo. Seoul and Washington are engaged in working-level tariff negotiations, vital for South Korea's trade-dependent. As reported by Yonhap, highlighting South Korea's evolving global diplomatic strategy. US President Donald Trump and UK Prime Minister Keir Starmer announced the finalization of a trade deal between the two countries at the G7 summit in Canada. Trump called the US-UK relationship just fantastic and confirmed the agreement was signed. Starmer said that the deal covers auto tariffs and aerospace, though specific details were not disclosed.
We just signed it, and it's done. And so we have our trade agreement with the European Union, and it's a fair deal for both. Going to produce a lot of jobs, a lot of income, and we have many other ones coming. But you see the level of enthusiasm is very good.
Japanese Prime Minister Shigeru Ishiba and US President Donald Trump failed to reach a trade agreement during a brief 30-minute meeting on the sidelines of the G7 summit at the Kananaskis Mountain Resort in Canada. The proposed deal aimed to reduce or eliminate tariffs but was stalled due to unresolved differences. Speaking after the meeting, Ishiba stated that while negotiations had continued until the last moment, key disagreements remained. He emphasized Japan's commitment to defending national interests, particularly in the automotive sector. Despite the setback, both leaders are expected to meet again at the upcoming NATO summit in The Hague next Tuesday, providing another opportunity to revisit trade discussions and attempt to bridge the remaining gaps in their positions.
これまで日本、アメリカ双方が本当に真摯な議論を精力的に続けました。で、ギリギリまで交渉の可能性を探ってきておるところであります。今なお双方の認識が一致していない、そういう点が残っておりますので、パッケージ全体としての合意には至っておりません。
The Bank of Japan left interest rates unchanged on Tuesday and announced plans to slow the pace of its government bond purchase reduction. The central bank, which started raising borrowing costs last year as it shifted away from its ultra-loose monetary stance, confirmed that its key interest rate will stay at approximately 0.5%. You're watching DD India Live. We're heading for a short break, but after the break, Air India plane crash probe panel holds first meeting in the national capital. Stay with us to know more. In a first, FATF acknowledges state-sponsored terrorism, says Pahalgam terror attack not possible without financial backing. And Taylor Fritz surpasses Novak Djokovic to claim the 4th spot in the latest ATP rankings. Tatjana Maria jumps to 43rd spot after a stupendous show at the Queen's Club Championships. Welcome back after the break. You're watching DD India Live. Israel and Iran traded attacks again on Tuesday, a 5th day of strikes in their most intense confrontation in history, fueling fears of a drawn-out conflict that could engulf the West Asia. Iranian media reported explosions and heavy air defense fire in Tehran early on Tuesday. Air defenses were also activated in Natanz, home to key nuclear installations. In Israel, air raid sirens wailed in Tel Aviv after midnight. And also an explosion was heard as Iranian missiles targeted the country again. However, Israel's National Emergency Services say that they haven't received any reports of injuries following Iran's latest strikes. Meanwhile, the IDF says that sirens were sounded across northern Israel and advised residents to move to bomb shelters. Iranian state media IRNA has reported that the country's airspace will be closed until 1400 local time, that is 10:30 GMT, in order to protect the safety of passengers and flight security. Iran's airspace has been shut since Israel's attacks last Friday, and flights have taken alternate routes as the two countries continue to trade strikes. Israeli military said it has killed Iran's armed forces chief of staff in overnight strikes on western Iran. In an official statement, the Israel Defense Forces said during the strikes, dozens of surface-to-surface missile storage and launch infrastructure facilities were struck. Surface-to-air missile launchers and UAV storage sites were also struck in western Iran. One clip appeared to show a strike on a surface-to-air launcher holding 3 missiles. After a new wave of strikes, both the countries activated their missile defense systems overnight, with Israel's army briefly urging residents to seek shelter. US President Donald Trump on Monday urged everyone to immediately evacuate Tehran and reiterated that Iran should have signed a nuclear deal with the United States. In a post on Truth Social, Trump said, and I quote, "Iran should have signed the deal I told them to sign. What a shame and waste of human life." Simply stated, Iran cannot have a nuclear weapon. I said it over and over again. Everyone should immediately evacuate Tehran. Heavy congestion was reported on the Kara-Chalas road heading west from Tehran on Monday. Long lines of vehicles were stuck in gridlock with the brake lights of hundreds of cars visible in the direction of Karaj, a city located just west of Tehran. This comes amid rising tensions as Israel launched a surprise air attack that decimated much of Iran's military leadership and its top nuclear scientists. The conflict, now in its fifth day, has led to heightened security and unpredictable disruptions, with air raid sirens sounding in Tel Aviv after Iran launched missiles towards Israel. Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu said that killing Iran's supreme leader Ayatollah Ali Khamenei would end the conflict between the two countries. He also defended Israel's ongoing military actions against Iran, adding that they are aimed at ending the conflict rather than escalating it.
It's not going to escalate the conflict, it's going to end the conflict. We've had half a century of conflict spread by this regime that terrorizes everyone in the Middle East, has bombed the Aramco oil fields in Saudi Arabia, is spreading terrorism and subversion and sabotage everywhere. That's the forever war is what Iran wants. And they're bringing us to the brink of nuclear war. In fact, what Israel is doing is preventing this, bringing an end to this aggression. And we can only do so by standing up to the forces of evil. Look, democracies have had to learn this lesson.
Israel strikes on the headquarters of Iran's state television in Tehran killed 3 people, the broadcaster said on Tuesday, a day after the attack. A senior correspondent of the broadcaster of Islamic Republic of Iran Broadcasting was seen reporting outside the building, which was engulfed in flames and smoke. Speaking to the camera, Yunus Shadlau said that Israel would not achieve anything by this attack and that they will see the worst. Visuals showed the building on fire even as a live broadcast was cut off after a loud explosion. The Israeli strikes came after it warned hundreds of thousands of people in the middle of Tehran to evacuate. The warning came on the 4th day of the conflict between the regional foes. Randhir Jaiswal, the official spokesperson for India's Ministry of External Affairs, has issued a fresh statement on X regarding the alarming situation in Iran. According to the statement, Indian students residing in Tehran have been evacuated from the city through arrangements made by the embassy for safety reasons. Those able to leave independently have been advised to do so in light of the evolving situation. The statement further assures that the embassy will remain in continuous contact with the community. Amid the ongoing conflict between Iran and Israel, India's Ministry of External Affairs on Tuesday set up a 24/7 control room in New Delhi. Additionally, the Indian Embassy in Tehran has activated an emergency helpline to assist Indian nationals in the region. The contact details of the control room are on your screens: 1800118797. Also, other numbers are 911123012113, 911123014104, +911123017905, and the mobile number is 9968291988. The email ID is situationroom@mea.gov.in. In addition, the Embassy of India in Tehran has set up a 24/7 emergency helpline with contact details on your screens. Also, for call, one can dial +98 912 810 9115 and +98 91 2810 9109, while +98 9010 44557, +98 901 599 3320, +91 808 6871709 are available for WhatsApp. Also, Bandar Abbas is available on +98 9177 699 while Zahedan can be contacted on +98 9396 356649. Indians can also mail on cons.tehran@mea.gov.in for assistance. In other news, the first meeting of the high-level committee set up by the government to investigate the tragic plane crash was held in New Delhi on Monday. The committee was chaired by Union Home Secretary Govind Mohan. The members of the high-level multidisciplinary committee, including Secretary, Ministry of Civil Aviation, senior officials from Home Ministry, officials of Home Department and State Disaster Response Authority of Gujarat, Police Commissioner of Ahmedabad, Director General for Inspection and Safety in the Indian Air Force and Director General of Bureau of Civil Aviation Security also attended the meeting. The panel will submit its report within 3 months, which is expected to focus on formulating standard operating procedures for preventing such occurrences in the future. A separate investigation is also being carried out by the Aircraft Accident Investigation Bureau, which is looking into the technical aspects of the crash. Air India's Boeing 778 Dreamliner aircraft, operating a flight from Ahmedabad to London Gatwick, crashed soon after the takeoff last week. Only one person survived out of the 242 people on board the plane. Mortal remains of Captain Sumit Sabharwal have been brought to a crematorium in Mumbai for the last rites. The 56-year-old pilot was flying the ill-fated London-bound Air India flight that crashed soon after takeoff in Ahmedabad on June 12th. Captain Sabharwal's mortal remains were brought to Mumbai by a flight this morning after his identity was confirmed through DNA testing. The Financial Action Task Force, the FATF, has condemned the Pahalgam terror attack, saying the attack could not have occurred without financial backing. The global watchdog, in a statement, said the Pahalgam attack and other recent attacks could not have happened without money and means to move funds between terrorist supporters. The FATF reaffirmed its support to over 200 jurisdictions within its global network to build and enhance their counter-financing of terrorism measures. It will soon release a comprehensive analysis of terrorist financing, compiling cases provided by the global network. FATF President Elisa de Ander Madrazo had recently emphasized that no single company, authority or country can combat the challenge of terrorism alone, and the world must be unified against the scourge of global terrorism. This is the first time that state-sponsored terrorism is being acknowledged by FATF as a funding source. Let's get to weather updates now. The Indian Met Department has forecast heavy to extremely heavy rainfall in many states across India. States in South Peninsular India are set to experience widespread moderate to heavy rainfall. Orange alert has been issued in Rajasthan, West Bengal, Odisha, Maharashtra, East Uttar Pradesh, Jharkhand and Bihar, Kerala and Konkan, Madhya Pradesh, Chhattisgarh. Rain will also lash parts of Tamil Nadu, Puducherry and Karaikal, Kerala and Mahe, Lakshadweep, Karnataka, coastal Andhra Pradesh and Yanam, Rayalaseema and Telangana till 20th of June. Heavy rains will also lash over 221 districts of Gujarat. In fact, have lashed 221 districts of Gujarat in the past 24 hours, bringing rain of 14.6 inches in Gadda, Botad. Chief Minister of Gujarat, Bhupendra Patel, has instructed district collectors to take steps to ensure the safety of the citizens' lives and property. Trains in Bhavnagar division were cancelled due to the torrential weather. In sports, Taylor Fritz has surpassed Novak Djokovic to claim the 4th spot in the latest ATP rankings on Monday. The jump in rank comes after his latest triumph at the Stuttgart Open against Alexander Zverev. The 27-year-old American had reached the same position last November, but slipped in the rankings during the clay court season. He now trails only the unchanged top trio of Jannik Sinner, Carlos Alcaraz and Alexander Zverev. Meanwhile, Tatjana Maria jumped 4 places to reach the 43rd spot in the latest WTA rankings. This comes a day after completing her fairy tale run at the Queen's Club Championships. The 37-year-old became the oldest winner of the WTA 500 event after she defeated America's Amanda Anisimova in the final. That's it in this edition of DD India Live, but let us know your thoughts on the news of the day. For those of you on the go, you can get all the latest news and updates from India and across the world on the DD India mobile app. This app is available on both Android and iOS platforms, and you can download the respective QR codes. We'll be back with more news as it breaks here on DD India. I'm Preeti Kaur signing off, and from all of us at in Delhi, thanks for watching DD India Live.